Imagine walking into a church, only to see your own photo on the altar, your name written on a funeral banner, and your entire family crying because they think you're dead. That's exactly what happened to me. And the moment I pushed those doors open, every single person's life changed forever. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. My name is Madison Clark, and I'm about to tell you something that sounds impossible, but it happened to me. The day my family gathered for my funeral, I wasn't in a coffin. I wasn't buried 6 feet under. I was standing right outside the church doors alive. And when I walked in, every single face turned pale, and the sound of gasps filled the room. But to understand why my family thought I was dead, you need to know what happened before that moment. I grew up feeling like the shadow in my family. I wasn't unloved, but compared to my brother and sister, I always felt invisible. My parents praised them, celebrated their milestones, and boasted about their accomplishments, while my achievements were often brushed aside with a simple, "That's nice, Madison." I carried that quiet ache with me for years, silently wishing for the day they would notice me, truly see me. When I finally moved to New York for a job, the distance only widened the gap between us. Phone calls were rare, and when they did happen, the conversations were brief and shallow. I convinced myself it didn't matter. I had my own life now. Still, deep down, a part of me longed for them to care the way I always cared about them. Then came the night that changed everything. After a long day at work, I was crossing the street when a car ran a red light and hit me. I remember the blinding headlights, the screech of tires, and then nothing. Darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The doctor explained I had been in a coma for days. My phone had been destroyed in the crash, and my ID was damaged, which made it difficult for them to notify anyone right away. Meanwhile, fate played a cruel trick. Another young woman, around my age and with similar features, had also been in an accident that same night. Tragically, she didn't survive. In the chaos of the hospital's records, my family was informed that I was the one who had died. While I was slowly recovering, weak and confused, my family was back home grieving me. I didn't know it yet. I was in my own fog of pain, trying to piece myself together physically and emotionally. By the time I was strong enough to leave the hospital, the nurse looked at me with pity and said, "You need to call your family. They think you're gone." At first, I thought she was joking. How could they think I was dead? But when I reached my hometown and saw the rows of cars parked outside a church, my heart nearly stopped. I walked closer, and there it was, written clearly on a sign, "Funeral service for Madison Clark." I felt the ground beneath me shift. My legs trembled as I approached the doors. Through the crack, I could see the faces of my family, my friends, neighbors I hadn't seen in years. All of them gathered because they believed I was no longer in this world. The priest was speaking solemnly, and then my sister walked up to the podium. She was holding a piece of paper in her shaking hands. It was my obituary. Her voice cracked as she read. Madison was quiet, but she had a heart full of dreams. She was stronger than she knew, and though we didn't always say it, we loved her deeply. I froze. I had waited my entire life to hear words like that from my family, and here they were, being spoken as though I wasn't there to hear them. Tears streamed down my face as I listened. My chest ached with both sorrow and something close to relief. They did care. They had always cared. Maybe they had just never said it out loud until they thought it was too late. I couldn't stay hidden any longer. My body was trembling, but I pushed open the heavy church doors. The sound echoed through the silence. At first, people turned just to see who was late. Then their eyes widened. One by one, jaws dropped, hands covered mouths, and gasps filled the air. My mother's face went white as she clutched my father's arm. My brother actually whispered, "It's her ghost." For a moment, nobody moved. They just stared at me as though I had stepped out of a grave. Then everything broke at once. My mom let out a cry so raw it pierced the entire room. She ran toward me, stumbling, sobbing before collapsing into my arms. Her tears soaked my shoulder as she choked out, "I thought I lost you forever. I thought I'd never see you again." My dad wrapped his arms around us both, shaking so hard he could barely stand. My siblings clung to me like they never wanted to let go. That day became the strangest, most heartbreaking, and most beautiful day of my life. My family mourned me, and then they got me back. And in that strange twist of fate, They finally realized what I had longed to know. That I mattered, that I was loved, and that my absence would have left a hole in their world they could never fill. Since then, everything has been different. My parents call me every single day, even if it's just to hear my voice. My siblings make time to check in, and they no longer let weeks or months pass without reminding me how much I mean to them. The distance I once felt has been replaced with a closeness I never imagined possible. But I also learned something even bigger from all of this. Life is fragile, and tomorrow is never guaranteed. The words we hold back, the love we hesitate to show, the apologies we think can wait, they might never get the chance to be spoken. I was given a second chance, a rare gift. I walked into my own funeral and discovered the truth about how my family felt. But not everyone gets that chance. So if you love someone, tell them now. If you appreciate someone, don't wait until they're gone to let them know. My name is Madison Clark, and I was the girl who walked into her own funeral. And that moment taught me the most important lesson of my life. Never wait to say the words that truly matter. I grew up in a family where I always felt invisible. My parents loved my brother and sister openly, proudly, and loudly, but me? I was the quiet one, the one they often overlooked. It wasn't that they hated me or mistreated me, it was more subtle than that. They celebrated my siblings' smallest achievements, my brother scoring a goal in soccer, my sister's painting hung at a school fair. But when I brought home good grades or won a writing competition, it was acknowledged with just a polite nod, as if my accomplishments weren't worth cheering for. As a child, I told myself it didn't matter, but as I grew older, the silence around my existence grew heavier. It was as though I was living in the background of my own family. I was always the listener, the supporter, the one fading quietly into corners. Eventually, I started believing maybe that's just who I was meant to be, someone who didn't matter enough to be noticed. When I moved to New York for work, the distance between us only grew. I barely called home. Not because I didn't love them, but because deep down I felt like they didn't care much whether I did or not. If I didn't call for weeks, no one checked in. If I texted, sometimes hours or days passed before I got a reply. I told myself it was fine, that I was independent now, that I didn't need their validation. But in truth, every unanswered call and every ignored message was another small crack in my heart. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late, and I had stayed back at the office to finish a big project. The streets were quieter than usual, the city lights glowing against the dark sky. I was tired but relieved to be heading home. As I stepped into the crosswalk, I remember glancing at the traffic light, glowing red, signaling cars to stop. I took a step forward. That's when it happened. A car came speeding through the intersection, ignoring the light. I barely had a second to react. The blinding headlights, the screech of tires, the deafening crash. It all hit me in one terrible instant. My body lifted, then slammed down with a force so strong I felt the air escape my lungs. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying in a hospital bed. The white ceiling blurred in and out of focus, my head pounding, my body aching in places I didn't even know could hurt. Panic set in until I noticed a nurse leaning over me, her voice calm but firm. She explained that I had been in a coma for several days. The doctors had been unsure if I would wake up at all. I tried to reach for my phone, desperate to hear my family's voices, but the nurse shook her head gently. My phone had been destroyed in the crash. All my contacts, my messages, gone. The hospital had struggled to identify me because my wallet had also been missing from the scene. They only had fragments of information, and for days I was a patient without a name. But the cruelest twist of fate was yet to come. The nurse hesitated before telling me what had happened while I was unconscious. She said that on the same night as my accident, another young woman had been admitted to the hospital. She was around my age, similar build, similar features. Unlike me, she hadn't survived. She carried no identification, and in the confusion, the hospital staff had mistaken her for me. My family was notified. They were told their daughter, Madison Clark, was gone. When I heard those words, my chest tightened, and my heart seemed to stop. My family thought I was dead. All this time I was lying in a hospital bed fighting to return to life. They were back home, grieving me, planning my funeral, burying me in their hearts. The thought haunted me. I pictured my mother receiving the phone call, her knees buckling as she dropped the phone to the floor. I imagined my father's stoic silence, the kind of silence that hides unbearable pain. I thought of my siblings crying, of friends whispering memories of me as if I was already a story of the past. I couldn't believe it. I was alive, breathing, my heart beating, but in their world I was gone. Days passed and I grew stronger physically, but my mind was filled with questions. Did they cry for me? Did they miss me? Did they finally feel the weight of my absence the way I had always felt the weight of being ignored? Or was I simply another detail in their lives, gone and soon forgotten? When I was finally discharged, I felt a strange urgency to go back home. I needed to see them, to know for myself how much I truly mattered. But when I arrived, nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Cars were lined up outside the church in my hometown. People dressed in black walked slowly toward the entrance, heads bowed in grief. My stomach twisted as I read the sign by the door. Funeral service for Madison Clark. It was real. They had buried me in their hearts. I stood frozen, staring at the building where my entire world sat inside mourning me. My knees felt weak, my chest tight. Inside, they were listening to stories about me, crying tears for me, speaking words I had longed to hear while I was alive, but they thought I would never hear them. In that moment, I realized something that shook me to my core. Sometimes people don't say how much you mean to them until they think it's too late. And sometimes you don't truly see how much you're loved until you're gone, or at least until the world believes you are. And as I took a shaky step toward the church doors, I knew nothing in my life would ever be the same again. I spent weeks recovering in the hospital, confused and weak. The world outside my window felt distant, almost unreal. I was alive, but it didn't feel like living. My body ached, and my thoughts were hazy, drifting in and out of painful memories of the accident. Nurses came and went, checking my vitals, speaking gently, offering comfort I wasn't sure I deserved. It was during one of those quiet afternoons, as I struggled to sit up on my own, that a nurse leaned closer and spoke words that froze me to my core. "You should call your family," she said softly. "They think you're gone." I blinked at her, confused. "What do you mean gone?" My voice was weak, but inside my heart raced. She gave me a look that told me she wasn't joking. And suddenly I felt like the walls of the hospital room were closing in. I wanted to laugh it off, to tell myself she meant something else. But the heaviness in her eyes told me she meant exactly what she said. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake, just another mix-up in the chaos of the hospital. Surely my family knew I was here, fighting my way back. Surely they would have come for me, searched for me, prayed for me. But as the days passed, that hope faded. A deep ache grew inside me, heavier than any broken bone or bruise. When I was finally strong enough to leave the hospital, I carried that dread with me like a shadow. My body felt fragile, but my heart felt like it was walking on glass. I needed answers, and I knew where to find them. The bus ride back home felt endless. I pressed my face against the window, watching the world blur past, my stomach in knots. Every turn of the wheels brought me closer to my family, closer to the truth I wasn't sure I wanted to face. When the bus finally pulled into town, I stepped off with shaky legs, clutching my small hospital bag as if it was the only thing anchoring me. And that's when I saw it. Cars lined up outside the church, a sight so ordinary it would have meant nothing on any other day. But these weren't strangers' cars. I recognized so many of them. My uncle's old blue pickup, my best friend's silver sedan, the neighbor's minivan. My chest tightened. Why were they all here, gathered on this day? Then my eyes lifted to the church sign, and everything inside me shattered. Funeral service for Madison Clark. My name. My funeral. The world spun. My hands trembled violently, and my breath caught in my throat. My family thought they had buried me. My parents, my siblings, even my childhood friends, they were all inside mourning me, believing I was gone forever. I could hardly breathe as I walked toward the heavy wooden doors. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure everyone inside could hear it. I pressed a hand against the cold metal handle, frozen in place. Part of me wanted to run, to escape, to avoid the scene waiting beyond those doors. But another part of me, the part that had longed for acknowledgement, longed for love, knew I had to see. I had to know what they were saying about me when they thought I would never hear. Slowly, I pushed the door open just enough to peer inside. The church was dimly lit, candles flickering along the aisle, casting soft shadows on the walls. The priest stood at the front, his voice solemn, echoing gently through the room. Rows of familiar faces filled the pews. My mother sat in the front row, her head bowed, her body trembling with silent sobs. My father sat stiffly beside her, gripping the edge of the pew so tightly his knuckles were white. My brother and sister leaned against each other, their eyes red and swollen from crying. And then my sister rose. My breath caught as I watched her walk slowly to the podium, her legs unsteady, her hands shaking as she held a small folded paper. She looked out over the crowd, her voice breaking before she even spoke. I want to read something we wrote for Madison's obituary." Her words cracked, and she took a deep breath to steady herself. The paper trembled in her hands as she read. Madison was quiet, but she had a heart full of dreams. She worked so hard for everything she wanted, and though she often kept to herself, her spirit was stronger than she knew. We wish we had told her how much we loved her while she was still here. Her voice broke completely then, and she covered her mouth, sobbing into the microphone. The sound filled the church, raw and painful. And I, standing just beyond the door unseen, felt hot tears streaming down my cheeks. For the first time in my life, I was hearing the words I had longed for. Words of love, of recognition, of pride. My family, the ones who had so often overlooked me, were now speaking of me with reverence, with grief, with love that seemed to spill from them uncontrollably. But the irony was cruel. They thought I couldn't hear them. They thought I was lying in a coffin, buried in the earth, unable to ever respond. The words I had craved all my life were finally being spoken, but under the belief that I was gone forever. I pressed my hand against my chest, my body shaking with sobs. My whole life I had wondered if I mattered to them, if my presence made a difference. And here in this heartbreaking, surreal moment I had my answer. I mattered. They loved me. They had always loved me, even if they hadn't shown it in the way I needed. Standing in that doorway, I felt torn apart and stitched back together all at once. The pain of knowing they thought they lost me mixed with the deep, undeniable truth that I had been loved all along. And in that moment I knew nothing between us would ever be the same again. My legs were shaking as I pushed open the doors. The heavy wooden doors creaked loudly, their sound echoing through the silent church like thunder. Dozens of heads turned at once, eyes narrowing in confusion. For a fleeting moment they thought I was just some stranger walking in late, someone who had stumbled into the wrong place. But then silence. Utter, complete silence fell over the room as they saw my face. My mother's face turned ghostly white, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came out. My father's body stiffened, his hand gripping the back of the pew so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. My brother's mouth fell open, and in a trembling whisper that seemed to hang in the air, he muttered, "She's a ghost." For a moment time itself seemed frozen. I stood there in the doorway, alive yet feeling like an intruder at my own funeral. The flickering candlelight danced across shocked faces, eyes wide, tears fresh on cheeks that had been mourning me only moments before. My heart pounded in my chest as if it wanted to burst free, as if it too was desperate to prove that I was no ghost, that I was flesh and blood, breathing and real. And then, as if someone had pressed play on a paused scene, the room erupted. People screamed, gasped, covered their mouths in shock. Some cried out my name, others stumbled back in fear, while a few rushed forward with trembling hands, reaching out as if they needed to touch me to believe what their eyes were seeing. The air was filled with chaos, fear, disbelief, joy, and grief all colliding at once. I took a few shaky steps down the aisle, my legs weak, my body still fragile from weeks in the hospital. Each step felt like wading through water, heavy and uncertain, yet driven by the pull of the people I loved. And then my mother broke. She let out a cry so raw, so filled with anguish and relief, that it pierced every corner of the church. She stumbled toward me, her arms outstretched, tears streaming down her face. When she reached me, she collapsed against me, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Her body shook violently in my arms as she clung to me with all her strength. "I thought I lost you. I thought I'd never see you again," she cried, her voice muffled against my shoulder. My father came next, his eyes wet with tears I had never seen him shed before. The strong, stoic man who had always seemed unshakable now looked broken, fragile, human. He reached out with trembling hands, touching my face as if to confirm I wasn't just a dream. His lips quivered but no words came, only tears that spoke louder than anything he could say. My brother and sister soon surrounded me, their arms wrapping tightly around me, holding me as though they feared I would disappear if they let go. My brother, who had always teased me, who had rarely shown his emotions, was crying openly, his chest heaving with sobs. My sister buried her face into my shoulder, her tears soaking my shirt, whispering over and over, you're here, thank God you're here." For the first time in years, I felt like I truly mattered to them. In their tears, their trembling voices, their desperate embraces, I felt the weight of their love. Something I had longed for, something I had doubted for so long. Around us, the rest of the congregation was still in shock. Friends, neighbors, people who had known me since childhood stood frozen, some with their hands clasped in prayer, others wiping away tears of disbelief. A few whispered words like miracle and blessing, while others simply stood speechless, unable to process what they were seeing. As my family clung to me, I found myself crying too. The tears flowed uncontrollably, not just from the overwhelming emotions of the moment, but from years of pent-up longing, years of wondering if I truly mattered. And here it was laid bare before me. Their grief at losing me, their relief at having me back, their undeniable love. I whispered through my tears, "I'm here. I'm alive. I'm not going anywhere." My mother pulled back just enough to cup my face in her trembling hands. "Don't ever leave me again, Madison. I can't survive losing you twice." My father nodded, his voice finally breaking through his tears. "You were always our heart, even if we didn't say it enough. We love you more than you'll ever know." Those words I had waited my whole life to hear, settled deep inside me like a healing balm. I realized then that maybe they had always loved me. But sometimes love goes unspoken until it's nearly too late. The service never truly continued after that. The priest, who had been delivering a eulogy only moments before, stood in stunned silence, his hands clasped, tears in his eyes. One by one, people came forward to hug me, to touch me, to whisper their disbelief and joy. "We thought you were gone," they said. "We thought we'd lost you forever." It was overwhelming, but it was also the most alive I had ever felt. That night, when the church finally emptied and my family brought me home, everything felt different. The walls that had once felt so cold and distant now seemed warm with life. My parents couldn't stop looking at me, as if they were afraid I might vanish. My siblings hovered close, making sure I had everything I needed, not letting me out of their sight. And as I lay in my childhood bed, exhausted but safe, I thought back to the moment I opened those church doors. My legs had been shaking with fear, but what I walked into was not fear, it was love. Love I had doubted, love I had questioned, but love that had been there all along. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen, cherished, and deeply, undeniably loved. And I knew that no matter what happened from that day forward, I would never again doubt my place in my family's heart. After that day, everything changed. It wasn't just about surviving, or the shock of walking into a room full of people mourning me. It was deeper than that. My entire world shifted in ways I never thought possible. For the first time in my life, my family stopped taking me for granted. My parents, who once seemed so distant, now call me every single morning. And it's not just quick check-ins about bills or responsibilities. It's 3 simple words. "I love you." Words that had always been there, hidden between the lines but never spoken out loud. Now they make sure I hear them every single day, as if they're afraid of losing another chance to say it. My siblings, who once teased me, ignored me, and sometimes acted like I was invisible, tell me constantly how proud they are of me. My brother, who rarely showed emotion, now hugs me tighter than ever and tells me, "I can't imagine my life without you." My sister leaves me little notes when I visit her. Things like, "Don't forget how loved you are," or "You're stronger than you know." Feels surreal. Almost like I've stepped into a different life altogether. The same faces, the same voices, but softer now, kinder now, more present. But you know what shocked me the most? It wasn't just their change, it was mine. The accident, the mistake, the funeral, it made me realize something powerful, something I wish I had understood a long time ago. Life is fragile. It doesn't matter how young or healthy we think we are. It doesn't matter how many plans we make for someday. None of us truly know how much time we have. I used to think I had forever. I thought there would always be another chance to say what I felt, to fix broken relationships, to chase my dreams. I thought I had all the time in the world. But lying in that hospital bed, fighting for breath, and then hearing my family read an obituary they thought was mine, that changed everything. I realized how many words I had kept locked inside. How many times I could have said, I love you but didn't. How many apologies I owed but never gave. How many moments I let slip through my fingers because I thought tomorrow was guaranteed. But tomorrow isn't promised. And sometimes when we wait too long, when we keep those words buried in our hearts, life doesn't give us another chance to say them. I was lucky. Incredibly lucky. I got something most people don't get, a second chance. A chance to live, to forgive, to be loved the way I always wanted. A chance to rebuild what I thought was broken forever. It wasn't easy though. Coming back from the dead literally changed the way people saw me. For weeks after, people in my town would stop me on the street wide-eyed saying things like, "I thought I saw your ghost at church," or "I still can't believe you're here." Some even told me I was a miracle. At first, it made me uncomfortable. I didn't want to be a miracle. I just wanted to be Madison, the girl who laughs too loud, who writes in her journal every night, who dreams of traveling the world. But slowly, I began to see the gift I had been given. Not everyone gets to stand at their own funeral and see how much they are loved. Not everyone gets to come back and say the things they left unsaid. So, I started living differently. I stopped holding grudges. When my father and I disagreed, I didn't storm off anymore. Instead, I told him, "I love you even when we don't see eye to eye." And you know what? He smiled in a way I hadn't seen since I was little. I reached out to old friends I had drifted away from. I apologized for the times I hadn't been there, for the silence I let grow between us. Some of them cried. Some of them told me they thought of me every day when they believed I was gone. Even with myself, I changed. I stopped being so hard on who I was, on the mistakes I had made. I began to forgive myself. Because if life is fragile, if tomorrow isn't promised, then wasting today on guilt and self-hatred is the cruelest thing we can do to ourselves. But above all, I made a promise to never leave love unspoken again. Now, whenever I think back to that moment at the church, the heavy doors creaking open, the sea of shocked faces, my mother collapsing into my arms, I remind myself of this one truth. Never wait until tomorrow to tell someone how much they mean to you. Don't wait to say, "I love you." Don't wait to say, "I forgive you." Don't wait to say, "I'm proud of you." Because sometimes tomorrow doesn't come. And when it doesn't, the silence becomes heavier than any words you were afraid to say. Life isn't measured by the number of breaths we take. It's measured by the love we give, the moments we create, and the people who remember us when we're gone. I was given a second chance. Not everyone will be. And I can't waste it. So if you're hearing my story, let it be a reminder. Call the person you've been meaning to call. Hug the people you love a little tighter tonight. Tell them what they mean to you. Because love unspoken is love that might never be felt. My name is Madison Clark. And I was the girl who walked into her own funeral. And trust me, life has never felt more real than it does now. Sparkles, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss the next one. Your support means the world to me.